Chair recognizes the honourable member for Long Island.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. No, checking for me today, you know. Mr. Speaker, I know that the hour is late, but I'm always pleased to be able to stand in this great and honorable House, no matter the hour, on behalf of the great and wonderful people of Long Island. Mr. Speaker, it's always my pleasure to be able to speak not only on their behalf, but to also speak about them. Mr. Speaker, yesterday I had the distinct privilege of joining with the community of Long Island as I joined in the commencement graduation exercises for the NGM Major High School, which was held at the Clarencetown Community Center. And I hold in my hand one of their programs. Mr. Speaker, as we know, NGM certainly is one of those iconic schools within the school system of the Bahamas that historically is probably a trailblazer and certainly at the top end of achievement every year from the time it's been in existence. But I'd like to commend not only the students, but the faculty, the staff, the parents, and the community, because one of the things we've discovered and we find works very well in Long Island is that community and parental involvement in the education of our children. But I would be remiss if I were not to say that out of a class of 22 graduates, the majority of the students passed with honors, distinction, credit, and then of course there were special awards. I was very, very happy to be able to be there yesterday, Mr. Speaker. And I think that Long Island certainly is one of those islands that is a beacon when it comes to education. And so I think we should continue to commend them. Mr. Speaker, amidst the daily drumbeat of what is often bad or difficult news, we should also remember to be grateful and to celebrate that what is good about our people and our country. Last week, Monsignor Preston Moss, the Vicar General of the Roman Catholic and Archdiocese and pastor of St. Anselm's Parish in Fox Hill, celebrated his 50th anniversary of his ordination as a priest. I remember him, and I ask that this House join me in acknowledging his marvelous milestone and in relaying our deepest regards to Monsignor and to the Catholic Archdiocese. Mr. Speaker, a friend of mine told me about a recent forum at the Bahamas Historical Society, which was commemorating Burma Road. Not only was the forum well attended, many of the attendees were young professionals. They were eager to learn more about our history and eager also to contribute to national development and the national dialogue on our shared future. The events surrounding Burma Road were a demand for change and for economic and social justice by workers who were fed up with being treated as second-class citizens in their own country and being paid less than foreigners for the same work. There has been considerable progress since 1942. Much has changed. We're considerably better educated as a society. Scores of Bahamians own their own businesses. Many more are employed at every level of the economy and in the public service. Many of our Bahamians have expertise, technical skills, and talent in a broad array of fields such as communications and creative arts. The rallying cry, however, Mr. Speaker, of Burma Road was essentially that of putting Bahamians first. It is deeply disappointing for me that nearly 75 years after Burma Road, that this PLP government is paying or planning to pay perhaps millions to a foreign company or foreign companies and foreign individuals to do advertising, public relations, marketing, website development and hosting, and other work that Bahamians are more than capable of doing, Mr. Speaker. You see, the use of foreigners to create and to conduct a program which, for this exercise, which is supposed to be our budget exercise, is being called Stronger Bahamas, is an insult to the creativity and the talent of many capable Bahamians, especially that largest sector of the unemployed, the young professionals. Mr. Speaker, let me deviate a little bit. When I went to Long Island as a candidate in the last general elections, there were two young students at COB who hailed from Long Island who asked me if they could work on my campaign team. Young Bahamians. Both of them today, one is in the media, whose name is very well known, I won't call them, and the other one is a teacher. They did all of my media campaign. They were still COB students. That is what you talk about, empowering young people. Mr. Speaker, I'll take it even a bit further. Last year, I wasn't successful, but once again, I had the opportunity to run a campaign within my own organization. And the people that ran that campaign for me, everything from commercials to whatever we were doing in that campaign, were young, talented Bahamians, young men and young women. And this is what we're doing today, Mr. Speaker. On top of that, the much vaunted public relations initiative is laughably ill-conceived and has backfired on the government. We have hired non-Bahamians to tell our Bahamian story. History, Mr. Speaker, or his story or her story, is told through the eyes of the writer. We need Bahamians to tell our story. This in no way helps to make the Bahamas stronger. Stronger for who? Stronger for who? The question must be asked. We are sending money overseas that should have remained in this Bahamas. Putting Bahamians first. My foot. Mr. Speaker, in offering my contribution to the debate on the 2015-2016 national budget, I once again do so in the name of the very good and wonderful and the industrious people of Long Island, whom I've had the privilege of representing in this House now for just over 3 years. The Long Island spirit is one of self-help. It is one that has a vibrant sense of community. I think about the regatta held this past weekend. I looked across the spectrum of persons at that regatta over the 3-day period. And this is the second year that the Minister for Regattas, I won't say local government, as they say they're two different portfolios, but the Minister for Regattas came to Long Island, having given some money, I must acknowledge, to the regatta, but once again talked about Long Island having the best regatta site and probably one of the most vibrant regattas, and he wants to invite people to Long Island to see what Long Islanders do to make it such a success. Mr. Speaker, I thank God. I thank God for the Long Islanders Association, the Long Island Sailing Club, the Long Island community, and the diaspora of Long Islanders throughout the Commonwealth of this Bahamas and even beyond our borders. And so, Mr. Speaker, it is them that makes probably one of the single largest economic impacts in our family island, Long Island Regatta, each year that affects a vast cross-section of businesses. Very successful event. But let me say, this year, I was a bit disappointed, even though I know that it was successful on the face of it. Mr. Speaker, Long Island still suffers from a lack of reliable, competent array of airlift to that island. Do you know how many people, Mr. Speaker, wanted to be in Long Island this past weekend, but could not be there? I have to commend Southern Air. I have to commend Sky Bahamas. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that Bahamas Air did put on, I think, 1 or 2 extra flights. But, Mr. Speaker, they say we don't just live there, we fly there. So when people won't get there, then fly there. That's the point. That's the national flag carrier that we actually help to make fly to these different places. And we can't get enough airlift unless some commuter charter company steps in. We don't even have Bahamas Air flying into northern Long Island, where we have the only 2 hotels, in our 2 international hotels on our island. They refuse to fly into Stella Maris, but if they chartered, they'll come. But yet they tell us Bahamas Air can't come to North Long Island. We have a 19-seater plane in the name of a private company that comes once, twice a day. And you know, Mr. Speaker, it just doesn't serve our purposes. But like I say, you know, Long Island, we persevere, we carry on. I beg, I ask, I implore the government to please do more for Long Island. We could have had greater economic impact this weekend if we had greater airlift. The Long Island Fair was another tremendous success, held about 3 weeks ago. Once again, due in great part to the dedication of Long Islanders here in New Providence and Long Islanders on other islands. Mr. Speaker, during the regatta this past weekend, a special point of pride was the competition for young sailors, teens and preteens who are mastering the art of sailing, the skills, and are helping to keep the sport and tradition alive. 10 years old, Don Knowles got the award for being the youngest sailor, single-handedly, this young man. Of course, he comes from the lineage of Lauren Knowles and those, the great boat builders from Mangrove Bush. Boy doesn't stand much taller than these desks. An outstanding sailorman, walking in the footsteps of his uncle, and his uncles and granduncles and forebears, Stephen Knowles, who totally annihilated the competition in Long Island this weekend. He must have carried just about every major sailing award this weekend. But not to be outdone were the young women of Long Island. Paloma Cartwright and her crew of girls, girl power, sailing on the Xena. And it's a very interesting story about the Xena. Xena was Paloma's sister, I understand. Young child stricken with cancer and died. The parents of this young woman lost 2 children in a very short period of time. As a tribute to one of their children, they built a boat called the Xena. Paloma and her girls, they sailed to victory. Girl power. So it's not just the men out there that are sailing, but the women are excelling. And we need to be able to incentivize these kids. Not only do these kids sail, these kids in their academic achievements. Paloma was one of the young girls that was recognized for outstanding academic achievements. So they're well-rounded. This is the sort of community we're building. This is where we have people who are willing to work, willing to sacrifice, and willing to do what it is to build strong families. But yet, much of what we get in Long Island is through the blood, sweat, and tears of our own. Very little is given back in terms of the tax dollars that are paid by Long Islanders to the public treasury. But we will survive. We will survive. And I can tell you that come next election cycle, when we become the government, Long Island's going to get what it's supposed to get. It's going to get what it's supposed to get. Because things like water and things like airlift, they are not luxuries. Those are an essential. They are an essential. And you know, the minister used the regatta site as an opportunity to promote some politics. I'm happy if we get the water that he said we're going to get. I'd be very, very happy. Because right now, people have to pay for what they call trucked water. Businesses have to conserve water. because of the huge expense. And I'm not, obviously we need water for our people. This is what Long Island needs. Long Island doesn't rely heavily on government to do everything. The good book says he helps those who help themselves. I'm praying that this government will reach out and help us. We're Bahamians too. But Mr. Speaker, I said earlier, the reason why Long Island tends to be so successful is the exceptional partnership that we see in the community, whether it's with the associations, whether it's with teachers and parents and students, whether it's with the churches. Mr. Speaker, Long Island works together. And I hear talk sometimes, they say they want to split Long Island again. For what? We only have 3,000 plus people in Long Island. We're just trying to mend all of the deep wounds of being split between North and South. For those who have heirs, let them hear. I don't know what the politicians are doing, but one thing I will tell you, Long Island needs to be a strong, unified island so that it continue. Well, if it isn't, I hope it is just propaganda, because the reality is we can't happening on the same weekend, you see. So in fact, Cat Island and Long Island used to compete at the Rake and Scrape Festival when the Long Island Regatta and the festival were held on different weekends. I mention all these things about Long Island for a reason. The people of Long Island, I am so proud to say, possess one of the hardest work ethics in our country. Their spirit of community, their entrepreneurial spirit, their commitment to education, the natural and the built heritage, the agricultural and marine resources, the network of Long Islanders throughout the Bahamas, and so many other features necessary for the development of family islands, but Long Island in particular. What we lack is that critical infrastructure needed to leverage these assets, to take us to the next level, to be able to have, as my colleague said to me, to be able to get 300 successful business families to go back to Long Island, to start building their retirement homes or second homes so that we can re-energize the economy. You know, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to give a report on my constituency funds, but sometimes I fly into North Long Island, sometimes I fly into Central Long Island. But the one that gives me the most heartache is when I fly into North Long Island. And to have to arrive at the Stella Maris Hotel, at the Stella Maris Airport, and to traverse the terrible road that goes from the airport to the Queens Highway. And it's not just for persons that use the airport. It's for second homeowners in that area. It's for the Stella Maris Hotel. It's for the workers, the employees. It's for people who go hunting. Lots and lots of crabs, Mr. Speaker. You didn't hunt about crabs. You should see them crabs in Long Island. And up in Stella Maris, as the Bahamians would say, they scornful, you know. But the point I'm trying to make is that, you know, Mr. Speaker, the homeowners have now taken on the spirit of the Long Islanders. They have decided that the potholes have gotten so big, the road is so rugged, so terrible. They now have become a self-help group. And they tried to raise, I think, about $40,000, which is really a drop in the bucket to remediate that road. They said they're going to go and they're going to try and fill just the big potholes so their cars aren't ruined. And a part of my constituency funds, yes, I've decided I'm going to give to it, but I do not think it's the best use of funds, even though it's private funds. Mr. Speaker, I live on a road. Every year they come through. It's right off Shirley Street. Every year they come through, they put some patch in it, and every year, Mr. Speaker, every year the hole get bigger and bigger. Right now, I was telling one of my colleagues, I said, you know, I guess they don't pave Retirement Road because I live on it. But the reality is, if you turned off Shirley Street onto Retirement Road, you will be dropping in the biggest of potholes, and that is what happens when you just patch it. And this is what they want to do in Long Island. They want to patch this long stretch of road that not only is going to experience rain. You heard me talk about the excessive ponds and flooding in Long Island. These are roads that are actually under water level. So it doesn't have to wait for the rain. That fill that they're going to put in for $40,000, that can get washed away. They think it's going to last for 4 years. I could tell them, come on, Retirement Road, it don't last 1 year. That's the reality. And so this is what our guests get when they fly into Stella Maris. The first thing they get is a bumpy ride to wherever they're going. That's how bad the road is. I must admit, I don't think the road belongs to government. I think it still belongs, let me give credit where credit is due. I think it still belongs to the development company. But the development company actually is not the only user of it. It's become a commercial airport. It's a port of entry. The airport, it doesn't matter what I was speaking of, Mr. Speaker. I'm speaking to you, and I'm letting you know exactly where we are. The airport is owned by the Bahamian people. So it's being used by everyone that goes to Long Island and lives there. And so I think, rather than us all having to come and put a few dollars in a hat, that maybe the government can look at that. That's the bigger point I'm trying to make. Okay? And so, Mr. Speaker, I understand that the owners had made overtures to turn this road over. But I ask that we look at that. Mr. Speaker, I was so proud a couple of weeks ago when the students of Mangrove Bush Primary School paid a visit here to the Parliament, and it was a wonderful affair because everybody spoke about how wonderful the children were and how smart they were. But it was then that the Prime Minister made a lot of promises. Now, this ain't my favorite newspaper. That's why I had to block out all the tantalizing stuff what they have in this paper. But I think you recognize this tabloid. I brought it for the headline. PLP set to fix up Long Island, promises PM. Islanders deserve to get modern air travel. The member for Eglinton was out of Parliament that particular day. And the Prime Minister said, I will direct Eglinton, the Minister for Aviation, to make sure that we get a proper airport in Long Island. And I then told her about it upon her return, and she then said, ain't nobody got it. Well, anyway, I wouldn't say what she said, but she said it can happen. So I'm just hoping. But these are the promises. The Prime Minister was full of promises. Now, if you tell a child something, I have children. They expect you to deliver, So, when you promise a child, they do remember. Mr. Speaker, please, am I suggesting, like the member for South Beach is saying, that I expect it to be delivered in 2 weeks? If she would like to have an intervention, let her do so. I don't expect it to be delivered in 2 weeks, but the point I'm trying to make, Mr. Speaker, is that the promises were made, and we're looking forward to it. Okay? We don't expect it to happen in 2 weeks.
Member. Member?
Mr. Speaker, there are major capital projects needed in Long Island, including a new international airport. But even smaller and medium-sized infrastructural projects will help to significantly improve the daily quality of life for residents and potentially attracting domestic and foreign direct development. I note for reference and by example the good work that was done during our tenure on the Montague foreshore. It was my privilege, Mr. Speaker, as the then MP for Montague, to spearhead the working group for the redevelopment of Montague. The extensive work included more beach area, an improved site for vendors, better parking and lighting, an enhanced recreation area for children and adults, as well as other amenities for Bahamians, residents, and tourists, including long overdue bathrooms. Projects of this nature make an enormous difference to residents of an area. I am proud to have coordinated this along with our Minister for Infrastructural Development, our former Prime Minister, and our colleagues in coordinating this. It was a public-private partnership. We're the ones that started this PPP you hear everyone heralding, you know. We started this with many of the projects that were left. And so, Mr. Speaker, all you have to do is look at the
Members.
all you have to do is look at the work that we've done with the private sector in that regard. I'll tell you another thing, Mr. Speaker. This same type of project was imitated at the regatta site in Long Island so that we can have reclamation of a beach right there at the regatta site. And once again, it was done by the people of Long Island. I commend them because they went and did the very same thing that they saw we had done in Montague. Our family islands need considerably more attention than is being paid by the government. I am happy for those islands that have received badly needed funds like Abaco. I'm so proud for him. And priorities for infrastructure. But I remind you, we're all participants in paying taxes. Islands like Long Island are being neglected even as this government wastes money, goes on expensive junkets around the world, hires friends, family, and lovers, and consultants at generous pay packages. Mr. Speaker, 2 weeks ago, my esteemed colleague, the member for St. Anne's, in his capacity as the chairman for the PAC, stated, "We are beset in the Honourable House of Assembly with a looming crisis of confidence." I thought he made an excellent and well-considered intervention, which, in a rare event, believe it or not, was carried in full both by the major daily newspapers. I fully support his statement, and I thank him and the Member of Parliament for Montague, for East Grand Bahama, for their determination in this matter. I note also the fine contribution to the budget debate made by the member for East Grand Bahama, Central Grand Bahama, North Eleuthera, and, of course, South Abaco. Analytical skills by East Grand Bahama in particular, in such matters, were impressive, an important part of the official opposition's role in this debate and in the deliberation of the House generally. I wish, as a part of the opposition team in this chamber, to build on the good work of my colleagues. Mr. Speaker, no matter how much this uncontrollable and non-transparent government tries to filibuster, harass, and block our efforts to have the Public Accounts Committee review how they're spending public funds, there shall, as some like to say on that side, there shall be no surrender and no retreat. I heard the Prime Minister utter those words last week. When the PLP talks about no surrender, no retreat, it is usually when they're actually on the defensive and in retreat. But whatever legal means necessary, the PLP shall surrender and shall retreat on the PAC, on the PAC's reviewing of various activities at urban renewal. Mr. Speaker, even more than a crisis of confidence in this honorable House, I submit that there's a crisis of leadership in this country, and I do not use the word crisis lightly. The Member of Parliament for Elizabeth resigned from the Cabinet of the Bahamas. The Member of Parliament for South Eleuthera says he's keeping his options open about resigning. There are not There are not votes of confidence, and these definitely are not votes of confidence in the leadership of the PLP. On Monday past, the MP for Marcos City offered his vote of no confidence in this government and in the PLP. In resigning from the PLP, he is saying what many PLPs and Bahamians feel about the crisis of leadership in our government and in our country. I want to quote his frustration and his disgust with this government. I quote, "I strongly encourage this party to look not at window dressing, but at changes. We clearly have a problem with leadership." He went on to say, "We clearly have a problem of leadership at an executive level and at a party level." He lambasted the government over crime, even as this government is launching its propaganda campaign. One of their very own has told the nation that things are not getting better under this PLP. And it's just like the Member of Parliament for East Grand Bahama has said time and time again. He says, their policies just ain't working. Mr. Speaker, the words the member for Marcos City had to say about the PLP speak loudly and clearly. This is what he said. "When we consider this question of whether the Bahamas is better today than 3 years ago, the answer is no." That is not just me speaking. That is the whole messaging behind the Stronger Bahamas campaign. That's something more needs to be done. Crime, mortgage relief, electrical rates, unemployment, education, education performance, work permits, taxes, transparency, law and order. It's very difficult to stand up and say any of those that have been worked out. What has our response been to? What has it been? To change our approach? To start to build a better structure? To make the changes within our organization that need to be made? Or just to change the packaging? In his words, window dressing. The message in Stronger Bahamas is that we are transferring the burden of governance in this place to you, the people. That's transferring the responsibility of where we are right now from us to them. That's like saying, we're not the ones who are responsible for making the streets safer. We're not the ones responsible for dealing with education or jobs and opportunities. We're not the ones responsible for building a modern Bahamas for our children to have a brighter future. We're not the ones responsible for building that momentum. The people are. But that's not what they elected us for. They elected us to come here with a vision. I always have to pull out this vision because you know they come with a new plan. This is the one they sold in 2012. They say Charter for Governance. And then they had one that said Vision 2030. But anyway, these are the words. These are the words that are an indictment of the PLP in the strongest terms possible. As serious as our annual deficit is, there's an even more alarming deficit, and that is a deficit of leadership. Good, effective leadership. It is a deficit of leadership by the Prime Minister and his reckless and out-of-control government. This government is the most incapable, most incompetent, and the most dysfunctional, and, might I add, delusional government since the advent of cabinet government in the Bahamas. This is the worst government in a modern Bahamian history. Instead of leadership, we are constantly being fed spin and propaganda and gimmicks. The crisis of leadership demonstrated by this Prime Minister and this government is compounded and made worse by a lack of vision. In place of a vision, the PLP brings out slogans. With reports of murders up to date, 17.5%, we are being told that the country is getting stronger, it's getting safer, it's getting this. Mr. Speaker, how could we be having a stronger country when murder is up 17.5%, according to the Commissioner of Police? With the Department of Statistics having stated in its last employment report that unemployment is up, the PLP is putting out the false propaganda that has produced many thousands of jobs. Where? For who? For who? They failed to produce the 10,000 jobs in the first year as promised. Now they want us, the Bahamian people, to believe that they have created tens of thousands of jobs. That is beyond delusional. If the government has produced that amount of jobs that it claims, then why is it budgeting $20 million for a new jobs program? The PLP heavily criticized the F&M for the jobs program we created during the Great Recession. Now the PLP is launching a very similar program. In his recent mid-year budget review, the Minister for Finance boasted. This is what he boasted, and he said, "I stand before you today with enormous confidence in our nation's economic future. Things are looking good. We're on the move. The engines of the national economic machine are being primed to propel us forward to a new era of economic prosperity. I am absolutely and unshakably convinced of that," end quote. Open quote again. Bright days lie before us now. We're all standing tall, our heads held high, our hearts brimming over with faith in our country and optimism about our future. More propaganda. Given the PLP's propensity for propaganda, their new propaganda line, "It's a wonder they didn't play Louis Armstrong's song, It's a Wonderful World." While the Minister of Finance was trying to convince us, despite evidence to the contrary, of how supposedly wonderful things are. If things are looking so good, and if bright days are ahead for us, why is the government creating the kind of massive jobs program that was created at the height of the greatest recession this country has ever seen since independence, or the world for that matter? A jobs program may well be needed. Our people need work. I want them to work. But instead of foolish and delusional talk, Mr. Speaker, and endless propaganda, we need straight talk from this government. We need leadership. Instead, we're confronted with a deepening crisis of leadership. Mr. Speaker, as I previously noted, the national unemployment rate rose on the PLP's watch, up from 14.3% in May of 2014 to 15.7% of November 2013 to 2014. Unemployment has risen in both New Providence and Grand Bahama. In New Providence, unemployment grew from 15% to 16%. And in Grand Bahama, it increased from 14.7% to a whopping 18.6%. A huge leap, Mr. Speaker. In January 2015, the Department of Statistics reported that there are 31,540 persons unemployed. That is 2,415 more persons that were unemployed when the F&M left office in May 2012. The news on the labor front continues to be disheartening and disappointing. A number of workers at Bahamas are being sent on unpaid leave, and the opening of the resort has been delayed twice. I drove past there today as I came in from the airport, and Mr. Speaker, I didn't see one vehicle on that premises doing any work. The fences are up, people are inside, but there's nothing happening. In his mid-year budget review in February of this year, the Prime Minister stated, and I quote him once again, "We expect to see a surge of new hires starting in earnest very soon as Bahamas prepares to roll out its new resort in phases, beginning just a month from now." And yet the member for Centerville says that he's not delusional. I almost died last week, Mr. Speaker. I almost died last week when the Prime Minister himself asked us, in reference to NHI, if we think he's stupid. I was almost tempted to answer, but I know, Mr. Speaker, you wouldn't let me answer that. So I can let the people of the Bahamas answer that. He did ask that question. The Prime Minister asked that question.
Member for Long Island, member yields. Chair recognizes a member for West Grand Bahama.
Mr. Speaker, I'm trying to figure out whether the member for Long Island is suggesting that the Prime Minister controls the opening of the property, Bahamas, or did he tell the country what Bahamas had reported to us? And if he told the country what Bahamas had reported to us, then how could the Prime Minister be blamed for any delay that Bahamas might be having due to its negotiations with its partners, Mr. Speaker? And if we're talking about being fair and being honest and doing everything correctly, then you ought to appreciate that the Prime Minister is not responsible for the delay. We are doing what we can to ensure that it opens as soon as possible.
Point of order or what?
Mr. Speaker, of course it is. Of course it is, Long Island.
Member, you will have your opportunity. Long Island.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, you have his time to talk about what he thinks is in the Prime Minister's head. I only can repeat what the Prime Minister said on paper. I was quoting him. I can't see in the Prime Minister's head. Maybe he has insight in his head. And so, Mr. Speaker, I continue to quote. This is what the Prime Minister said. We expect to see a surge in new hires starting in earnest very soon as Bahamas prepares to roll out its new resort in phases beginning a month from now. That was from the midterm budget. And he asking me if I blame the Prime Minister. I only repeated what the Prime Minister said. And I know it hurts to hear the truth, but the reality is I am speaking the truth. So March has come and gone, as has April and May, and we are now in June. Mr. Speaker, I do not have to yield to the plenary.
Member for Long Island.
I do not have to yield.
The member states that he has a point of order.
But let him
Member for West Grand Bahama. Member for West Grand Bahama. Just you yield.
Exactly, because I need to
No. I'm speaking to him. Yes, you do. If the member stands on a point of order,
it's not even identified.
The member has. The chair heard the member say point of order.
I haven't heard because I was talking. Remember, I have the floor.
No,
no, it's not a problem. I have the floor.
Member for Long Island.
You don't listen when you're talking.
Members.
You don't listen when you're talking. I have the floor. You don't have no point of order.
We are going to suspend this house for 5 minutes. House under suspension. The house is on suspension.
I have the floor. I have the floor.
And I just want to state for the record that this is a warning. If this happens again, I'm going to suspend until the next sitting. I'm not going to return any more this evening. I expect the behavior of all honorable members to be decent and in order. And I'm speaking specifically to the member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini. When the chair rises, the chair expects every single member in this place to cease and desist from further talk across the floor. It is inappropriate and it is unfortunate. And the chair doesn't expect it from a senior member. Member for Long Island.
Appreciate that you had stood, Mr. Speaker, and I do humbly apologize.
Very well. Thank you, honorable member. Member for Long Island, by the rules of the House, member, take your seat. The chair is speaking.
I thought you told me you wanted me to.
No, the chair didn't. The chair is speaking to you. When a member stands on a point of order, it is not the person who's speaking who determines whether the point of order is fit or unfit. The chair makes that determination and a ruling. We know in this House, oftentimes, point of order by distinction are not clearly defined. We understand that, we accept that, we are gracious in that. So if the member stands on a point of order, the chair respects that, and the member must yield. If the member stands on a point of clarification, the member then has an opportunity to determine if they would yield or not. That's the rules. And so all the chair was doing was allowing the member to stand on a point of order. Nothing more, nothing less. I think we can understand that and we can move on. Member for Long Island, you may continue your presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I must say that, you know, as you said the other day, that everybody should have their opportunity to speak. When I am speaking and they're telling me that I should be listening, I don't know how it's possible for me to have the floor and be trying to listen to them as well. And so, quite frankly, I have the floor, so I can speak. And I thank you very much.
Member.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister also went on to tell us that bright days lie before us now. even as we have been continually plunged into many dark nights and powerless days thanks to the government's incompetence at BEC and its delays in reforming the energy sector. I find it amazing that the Prime Minister is flying all over the country trying to convince everyone that he is not delusional. This, of course, is the very picture of delusion. BTC and BEC are intending to lay off staff. Scotiabank is closing branches. This morning, somebody flew into Long Island. They tell me that they're finally closing the branch in Long Island, and, you know, we're just going to have automatic 2 days down there with automation. Mr. Speaker, this is what's happening in the private sector. Atlantis is laying off staff. A number of businesses in Grand Bahama are being closed despite the PLP's promise to bring relief to that island. Industrial action looms on the horizon at some of our public corporations. And, Mr. Speaker, small and large businesses, many of which are having to lay off more and more Bahamians. Just this past weekend, people are begging me, what sort of relief are we going to get from this VAT? What sort of relief we're going to get from that? That is really what they're saying. And now businesses that were previously filing over the last 6 months, quarterly and half yearly, are now moving forward, going to have to make filings every month. Means more man time, more power. Mr. Speaker, it's really, really hurting the private sector. The government says that it's taken in more money from VAT than expected. We, the Bahamian people, we need to know how much money has been taken in and how it's being spent. Many Bahamians are worried. They're worried that this government will go on a wild spending spree, including doling out even more money to lucrative contracts and consultancies for friends and their families and acquaintances. You know, Mr. Speaker, a lack of energy sector reform and chronic power outages are resulting in lost profits for many businesses and driving small businesses to the brink. And homes, people are losing appliances, people are losing food stuff, and nobody is having any recourse, Mr. Speaker. The government, I am told, has a number of small contractors who can't afford to wait for months to be paid, and they're being strung out, being told that they have to wait. You know, the other day they were talking about the carnival entertainers, the Bahamians, who were in the paper saying they hadn't been paid. And before the speaker who was talking to get the words out of his mouth, the member for Carmichael was on his feet saying, oh, we're going to have a big celebration, and we're going to have an award ceremony, and we're going to give out the money then, and the people didn't know they was getting the money then. But thank goodness, that same person who was in the paper, that's not what they get the money. They had to wait for the award ceremony because of agitation. You see, people can't afford to wait. They have to pay bills, they have to live, they have to eat, they have to take care of the children and families. So even as Bahamians are hurting and struggling to pay their bills, our Prime Minister is singing a happy song and doing a happy dance. Carnival is over. Now is the time to stop the party and bring some leadership in this place and end the shuffling. Many homes are being foreclosed by financial institutions. The promised mortgage relief initiative has been a colossal failure. Businesses are operating at the margin or unprofitable. Families and businesses are threatened by both financial difficulties and crime and the fear of crime. I note with great concern a shooting at one of our junior high schools. This is alarming and deeply worrying. 3 years after its election, the PLP has been unable to bring hope and relief. Instead, this administration has made matters worse. So to distract from their failures and their scandals, they're rolling out a massive propaganda effort to try to get us to believe. Contrary to overwhelming evidence that the country is getting stronger, the question must be asked, stronger for who? Now that they are fully delusional, they want to get the rest of us to join them in this alternate universe where failure is success and weakness is strength. There are elements of the recent carnival that may have been well done, but was it worth the $9 million? Perhaps more. It was spent during what was still difficult economic times. We still have not gotten a full accounting on the cost of the carnival. They said at 21 days. We're heading towards now 28 days. Perhaps we never will. Add 9 million or more for carnival to the nearly 4 million for this new propaganda budget for the office of the Prime Minister, to the potential millions lost because of the dormitory fire at Bamsi. The expenditure of these funds alone in the range of $15 to $20 million. And this is just for these three items. There is little tangible to be shown for these expenses, except for an uninsured, burnt-out building in Andros. Yet this government has not built a single school in 3 years. Crime is threatening Bahamians in their homes and in their businesses, threatening our way of life and threatening our international reputation. There has now been crime advisories by the governments of the United States of America, Canada, and the United Kingdom. The British media has carried stories on the murder of Britons in the Bahamas, as well as on the crime situation in general. After 3 years in office, this government has not launched a major crime intervention program. Yet the Prime Minister gets up in front of an audience, including foreigners, and talks foolishness about how he is subjected to walking on eggshells while he wants the madness on our streets to stop. Could you imagine? That's what the Prime Minister said. What a spectacle. You know, we've got to stop this whining. From the top of our governance, we've got to stop this whining. We need a Prime Minister that's going to do something. If we can spend $9 million or more on the carnival, why haven't we already done more to create some more effective interventive crime strategies? The member for Centerville has the distinction of being the only Prime Minister since independence to have not completed one single new school. But I suppose it's just as well, considering their record of no bid and uninsured contracts. Imagine the scholarships, the crime-fighting initiatives, the social assistance, the apprenticeship mentoring efforts, the technical training, and other programs that could have been funded with this $15 to $20 million. I've got to ask this question. Is it the case, Mr. Speaker, and I'm only asking, that any senior member of the government has stayed in hotels overseas that cost thousands of dollars a night, while we as Bahamians are here struggling to buy groceries and pay electricity bills? I urge the Public Accounts Committee to conduct an extensive review of the expenses of foreign travel of senior members of this government. This should include the number of aides, officials accompanying certain ministers on foreign trips. The Minister of Finance long ago promised a full accounting and disclosure of the expenses of his large delegation.
Point of order, member for Long Island, point of order. Here, members, the member for Yamacraw has the floor. Here, member from
If I may, and I'll take your guidance on this, Mr. Speaker, but I don't know, my point of order is this. The member is putting out there something, even though she's putting it out there as a question. It's an innuendo. And unless she could state that it is a fact that is happening, I think the member should not allow to be able to stand on, on the table, Mr. Speaker, because she's just asking a question. Anybody can get up and ask a question. Either you know something to be a fact or you don't. And you just can't throw it out there and throwing it out there, just paint everybody with a brush, Mr. Speaker, and I don't think it's fair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Thank you, Honourable Member. Member for Long Island.
Thank you. After returning from a trip to one of our Caribbean, I was saying, Mr. Speaker, we have yet to get an accounting from the Prime Minister, even though he said he would give us an accounting to the Commonwealth Heads of a Government meeting in Sri Lanka with the follow trip off to Rome and London. It's been nearly 2 years now, and we have yet to receive such an accounting. I urge my colleagues in the PAC to also look into this matter, since we haven't got the accounting. It appears that the Prime Minister believes that maybe he have to account to this House, but he does have to answer, Mr. Speaker, because these are the public funds, and it's not our money, and it's just totally being delusional in thinking that it is. After returning from a trip to one of our Caribbean neighbors, the Prime Minister came back excited at how wonderful the official residences of certain leaders are in other jurisdictions. And at the time that he spoke of refurbishing at what would have been at considerable expense an official residence for the Prime Minister. I'm wondering now if the Prime Minister spoke to the Minister of Finance about this matter, and does either or both of them intend to proceed with this matter during this current term? Even as many Bahamians are losing their homes, is the Prime Minister still considering spending millions building an official residence? You know, the Auditor General has raised serious and troubling questions about various operations, Mr. Speaker, with regards to urban renewal and small home repair. Not only is the government trying to block the efforts of the Public Accounts Committee to review the problems raised by the Auditor General, but now, Mr. Speaker, under this very same urban renewal, there's going to be an additional $20 million, despite the inefficiencies in accounting, poor management, and other troubling things at urban renewal. If we can't trust the government to do the right thing with urban renewal, I must ask the question then, can we trust them with the rolling out of all of this money from VAT? Because of VAT, the cookie jar is being replenished. And I dare say maybe some cookie monsters are just waiting to fill up. But, Mr. Speaker, we need to know, having so massively failed, the member for Centerville is in full propaganda mode, desperately trying to spin his failures and broken promises. Now he's asking Parliament for nearly $4 million that he can use in a massive propaganda campaign to try to convince the Bahamian people that he and his government are doing a good job. This is much like a fisherman trying to convince customers to buy a 5-day-old fish that's been left out in the open. Even though you see the fish, you see the flies with your own 2 eyes. And you see the fish is rotten, the fisherman still trying to peddle his fish to you, tell you, yeah, this fresh fish caught today. They could take, you know what? With that type of propaganda, you could take the greenest, the most sour tamarind and call it the sweetest tamarind in the Bahamas. Forgive me, but given the PLP's propaganda, it would be the sweetest tamarind in the universe. This government of empty slogans and broken promises. Who can forget these? Who can forget these? Charter for Governance, Urban Renewal 2.0, Swift Justice, Hope and Health, Believe in Bahamians, Bridge to the Future, and now the latest empty slogan, Stronger Bahamas. These are all PLP policies that just ain't working, Mr. Speaker. Whatever happened to the Bridge to the Future? Given the record of this government, the contract for the bridge would probably be given to a PLP crony in an untendered and uninsured contract. Mr. Speaker, we all want a stronger Bahamas. Unfortunately, the PLP and these failing policies is not making a stronger Bahamas. The country is weaker. Once upon a time in the world of make-believe, not that long ago, the PLP promised 10,000 jobs right away, mortgage relief, national health insurance, a doubling of the national education budget, and a safer Bahamas through urban renewal. 3 years later, having failed to meet these and other promises.
Point of order. Member yields. The chair recognizes the member for Marathon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the member for Long Island said that the PLP government promised a doubling of the budget for education. The PLP never, ever promised a doubling of the budget in education. Never. Promised to double its investment in education and training, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, I have stood on occasions, and I will again tomorrow, to show that the PLP government, this administration, has more than doubled the investment in education and training. I will talk to it tomorrow, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
But that is not what we said. We said nothing about the budget.
Member from Long Island?
Mr. Speaker, in the Charter of Governance, they said they will double their investment in education. And so, Mr. Speaker,
member from Marathon, I think we got the message. The member repeated what you said. She repeated what you said as accurate. She did repeat it. The member did. No, pause. Just pause.
Education.
Member, pause.
Thank you.
Both members sit down. Member for Marathon, you are correct. When the member for Long Island stood back up and retorted, she indicated that it was doubling the investment in education.
Investment in education and in training, Mr. Speaker. Okay? That's fine, Mr. Speaker. Yeah.
Okay. Very well.
Yeah, get it right,
Very
Mr.
well.
Speaker.
Member, you may continue.
Yeah, but she.
The PLP and these foreign puppet masters seem to be very good at slogans and labels, but they are abysmally poor at substance. They promised mortgage relief. So said, never delivered. The PLP promised the people of Grand Bahama that they would construct a new state-of-the-art hospital using Bahamian contractors and labor. So promised, never delivered. You can't tell people they're getting grouper or snapper or turbot and then give them tilapia and expect them to believe that they're getting what you promised. You know, if you give a Bahamian boiled tilapia, the first thing they can do, they say, I know boiled grouper. They know exactly what that is. It's not about the labels and slogans, it's about the substance. Instead of substance, the PLP just keeps giving us more labels, more slogans, more excuses, more foolish talk and propaganda. Last week, in one of his greatest propaganda efforts ever, and even as he was in humiliating retreat on his promise of national health insurance, the Prime Minister blatantly said to the House that there would be no retreat on NHI. Amazingly, the PLP stopped, reviewed, and cancelled its initial plan on NHI. As Bahamians like to say, they reversed back. One could hear the screeching halt and things being put into reverse as the member for Centerville was talking. The PLP is desperately trying to dress up improvements to the hospital and the hospital plant as NHI. No Bahamian will actually have health insurance from what the government is proposing, yet the PLP is trying to label what they're proposing as national health insurance, which brings to mind, Mr. Speaker, the question of what is happening. I understand that the police are being advised that they won't have insurance after January 2016 because it's going to be replaced with national health insurance. I think that is going to have to be answered as well. The police, those people who stand on the front lines of protecting our borders and the other uniformed branches, they are wondering, will they still have their insurance? The one thing that they truly work for, even though they haven't gotten any pay increases in the past 10 years.
Point of order. Chair recognizes the member for members. One member has the floor. Chair recognizes member for Bain and Grandstand.
I wonder if the member can tell us who told the police they wouldn't have insurance and which police were told that.
Inciting fear and hatred.
Well, she does.
I wonder if she can tell us that. If they were told it by whom, and who was in fact told it.
No, tell me what
talking to you. I'm not talking to you.
Member, you've made your point. You've made your point. Yeah,
I'm
very
not
well.
talking to you.
You made your point.
Tell you what?
Member,
Just tell us.
very well, very well. Members. Member for Long Island, the member for Bain and Grandstand has obviously taken issue, and you've made an assertion, and the member.
I asked the question. I didn't make an assertion. I asked.
You made an assertion, and in your assertion it casts an innuendo, and so Chair would like you to look at that, to deal with that, to restate that, to clarify that. Let's clarify that for the Chair.
The question, I will re-ask the question on behalf of the police officers. Will their insurance that they currently have, will it be replaced by the National Health Insurance Plan in January 2016? Inquiring minds want to know. Police officers want to know. Other officers of the uniformed branches would like to know.
Very well. Thank you, Honourable Member. Member for Bain and Grandstand.
The
Yes.
member said the police were told. That she didn't ask any question. She didn't ask any question of me. So just say who told her. Because if she doesn't say who told her, people know that no one told her that. And no one told the police that.
Very well.
Dishonest, man. Come on.
Member for Long Island. The reason why members. Member, thank you. The member for Bain and Grandstand raised the point. The reason why the chair initially asked the question for clarification is because the chair also perceived your question as you introduced it by stating that you heard members were told, you heard the police were told. The chair heard that. Now, so unless you have some proof of that, that should just be withdrawn.
I already said, Mr. Speaker, when I put the question just now, that I withdraw what I said. I don't
so
understand the reason for the second point of order.
Very well. It's understood. Okay. Very well.
But I'm going to tell you, whatever the answer is, the people would like to know. I wish to again remind the House of what the member for Centerville...
It's withdrawn. It is withdrawn. It is withdrawn.
At the time, the member for Centerville faithfully promised, I want to create a system of national health so that poor people will stop dying simply because they are too poor to pay for major medical attention. This is the greatest national disgrace of all. And he went on to say, how can we call ourselves a caring, compassionate society when the difference between whether a young child lives or dies depends on whether he or she is covered by private health insurance or not, or whether the parents have the money to pay for the operation or not. Went on to say that such a situation still exists in our country is a stain on the social conscience that must be removed. And it will be removed under my administration because the PLP will treat the introduction of national health insurance as a matter most urgent priority. That was back in 2002. And when the Prime Minister says that something is most urgent, that means it could take as long as it has now, or it may not come. We were promised this in 2002, and now, once again, in 2012, it has yet to happen. They have finally accepted the reality that the F&M's approach to NHI, which began with the introduction of the prescription drug plan. I know that in our 2012 manifesto, we proposed a catastrophic health insurance program. Had we been elected, the implementation of such a program would have already begun. And so, in 2015, the Prime Minister who was elected is now singing a different song, a different tune than he did in 2002 or even in 2012. Here is what he said last week. This is what he said last week. We will phase in the initial national health insurance services for all Bahamians over the next 5 years, commencing on the 1st of January 2016. But the full journey to full national health insurance will take longer, as it has in every country that has embarked on this country. Incredible. Unbelievable. Their plans just ain't working. So when we talked about the phasing in of NHI, they said we lack compassion. They were labeling their phased-in approach as being responsible. Mr. Speaker, this government of make-believe and magical thinking, the government of vain hope and false promises, to give us propaganda when what we need is leadership. They give us slogans when what are needed are serious answers. Of the money that was collected from that, how much of it is toward the deficit and the no debt? He turns on that $9 million investment in gold. How much of the carnival funds did the government spend on foreign vendors and entertainers? Up at Central Court, our national debt ratio exceeded the 70% threshold and was pegged above 73%. How has the government addressed this? And so during the mid-year budget review, the Prime Minister said that there was a silver lining. Is this silver lining somewhere far, far, far away, near the end of a rainbow, at which sits a pot of gold, all of which the Minister of Finance is the only one that seems to see? How is it? How are those delays at Bahamas affecting our revenue projections? Does the government, do you think the non-payment of money owed to Bahamas by the government of Bahamas, which the PLP has so far not paid, affected the work schedule and operations of the resort? With the very highest kilowatt cost, or probably one of the highest for electricity, Will the government be seeking to increase electricity costs or allow the incoming management group to increase the cost? The talking points the government put out for its propaganda extravaganza, which was postponed, had the contact person of a foreign individual who could be called with messaging. Imagine that. 3 years in office, and the PLP has brought in a non-Bahamian to draft its message. One can only imagine what the PLP has been doing over the last 3 years. It is embarrassing that Bahamian cabinet ministers and MPs are being advised to contact a foreigner to get advice on what they should say to the Bahamian people, and this from the party that claims to believe in Bahamians. The PLP's talking
Members,
just show just how confused, out of touch directions government is. One of the propaganda point notes that Stronger Bahamas is a new vision for the Bahamas. The PLP told us that it had a new vision at the last election, 2012. Why does it take a new vision now, just 3 years after being elected? Obviously, the plans just ain't working. Wasn't the Charter for Governance supposed to be its vision? What happened to that? What the country needs is governance, not an advertisement for a supposedly new and improved product that looks more like a mirage than a vision. Mr. Speaker, the opposition demands to know the amount of money being paid to foreign entities and expended on the current massive propaganda effort at great cost to the Bahamian people, in whom the PLP clearly and demonstrably do not believe. A national budget is much more than a statement of numbers and words. More importantly, it is a statement of values and aspirations and hopes. A better, stronger, and more vibrant Bahamas will not come about through slogans, propaganda, campaigns, TV commercial speeches, and fancy parties. What is needed, Mr. Speaker, is leadership. The crisis of leadership by this Prime Minister and this government is not making our country stronger. It is making our country weaker. No amount of slogans and propaganda.
members.
Sadly, the next 2 years will be more of the same as the country continues to get weaker and weaker on this government's watch. The Bahamians and the Bahamas deserves much more. Long Island thanks you, Mr. Speaker.